The Titans have kicked off phase 3 of OTAs. That means they can finally do offense versus defense. How has Cam Ward looked so far? I would say he's impressing people. We're going to talk about that. We've got some other players to talk about, absences, and other quick hitters that we're going to get to as we recap Titans phase 3 of OTAs, the open practice from Wednesday. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it.
Going against aerosol BS is not real football. So anytime I get a chance to go against the defense, especially going like ours, it's a blessing because we finally get to get real game speed, real time, and what it's going to be like. But then really just you see a lot of people's character when the bullet starts flying. We have a great group around us. We know adversity is going to come, but biggest thing about us, we're not going to point fingers.
Cam Ward says, throwing on air is BS. I love this quote. Welcome, everyone, to the Music City Audible podcast presented by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville. In partnership with 440 Sports and Broadway Sports Media, I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo, and we're back here to talk about Phase 3 of OTAs. Titans had an open practice, open to the media on Wednesday. We got a lot of great nuggets that we're going to go through, but we're going to spend, I think, the majority of this time talking about Cam Ward because he is the big story for the Titans, obviously, and he's doing well so far in his first, actual reps against a defense on an NFL practice field. Justin, how's it going?
Doing well. Really excited about all those updates that came out of OTAs. Get to talk about Cam Ward, JC Latham, Brian Callahan's media availability, position battles at certain positions, stuff that Denard Wilson said, Femi Oladejo, just some really good stuff to cover out of OTAs these last couple days.
Yeah, and I've got a few clips here I'm going to play from Wednesday's press conferences. We're going to talk a little bit about JC Latham's appearance on Bussin with the Boys, which apparently was recorded weeks ago, but just came out earlier this week. I listened to that whole interview, and honestly, I would encourage everyone to go listen to it if you're a Titans fan, because it's really good stuff from JC Latham. But Justin, before we dive into all of this, I hear you have some kind of special, exciting news announcement you want to share with our audience.
Yeah, bit of an announcement. If you guys were aware, I wrote a book last year, Titans of the South. It's in my background. It's in Graver's background somewhere over there. This is really exciting. And, well, number one, bad taste in my mouth ending the book on the 2024 season, right? So we're calling this one the 2025 pack. The new release will have an extra chapter in it covering 2024 and the 2025 offseason. Like, it's going to cover it up until right now. I'm probably going to skim over a lot of 2024 to get to the exciting stuff. Drafting Cam Ward number 1 overall. Not only will this have a new chapter, the real exciting part about it, I think, is you will also get a special illustrated trading card of Cam Ward included in your purchase. Now, this is only for the first 1,000 buyers. It's U.S. only, U.S. residents only, and on top of it, you're getting 33% off the retail price. It'll be available for $20 only. Now, again, this is limited to the first 1,000 buyers. It's U.S. residents only, and you have to get it on the official book website, which is titansofthesouth.com. So if you are outside of the U.S., you can still get the book. As many of you know, I've had a ton of international buyers through Amazon in your country. But Amazon is not going to have the 2025 pack. This is available exclusively through the website, titansofthesouth.com. It's for U.S. residents only. And now, again, if you buy it on Amazon, even in the U.S., you're not going to be able to get the 2025 pack. You're going to get the initial edition that was printed last year. But Titans of the South 2025 pack, it's available for pre-order right now on titansofthesouth.com at just $20. Again, you're going to get the new chapter covering the history up until right now. So we're going to continue from 1960 all the way through 2025, and you're going to get a special illustrated Cam Ward trading card. So really excited about this re-release. We don't anticipate it's going to last very long. Titansofthesouth.com, first 1,000 buyers.
And that link is in the podcast description, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast app. We have that link there for you, so you don't even have to remember it. You just got to scroll down a little, click a link, and go check it out. I'm ordering mine right now. Justin, thank you so much for bringing this to the people. I think we needed it with the Cam Ward excitement. Got to add the Cam Ward chapter to Titans of the South. So, all right, Justin, let's get into Titans OTAs here. The first thing I'm going to talk about, before we talk, like I said, we're going to spend a lot of time on Cam Ward. But before we do that, Brian Callahan gave a really interesting answer towards the beginning of his press conference, and I'm just going to play the question and the clip because I really love this, and I want to see what you think about it, Justin. So here we go.
How do you kind of burn away the bad taste from last year and just kind of get that out of everybody's mind, but yet still haven't learned from it?
I'll be honest with you, Terry, I don't really want to burn that taste out of our mouth. I want to. I feel it every day when I walk in here, and our players should too. The ones that were here, because we don't want to be in that position. We don't want to have the type of season we had last year. We're determined to make that look different. So I think part of that being in the back of our minds is a good thing. It's motivating in the sense that we don't want to repeat our mistakes. We don't want to repeat the things that lost us games, and we got to improve those things to put ourselves in better position to win.
I really hope Brian Callahan works out as the Titans head coach, because I think he is so smart. He's a really good speaker. He communicates what's in his brain really well. And that answer just shows, like, that's exactly what you want him to say right now. You don't want him to say, like, oh, we're flushing it and forgetting it, because I feel like how many podcast recaps, Justin, like game recaps, do we come on this show and say, well, another one of the Titans just got to flush and move on to next week because that was terrible. It's like, at a certain point, you can't just flush it because you're not getting better. And I love that he's saying, like, and this goes with what we talked about last week. This is perfectly in line with, you know, everything we're doing this offseason is about correcting the mistakes that lost us games last year. He's saying, like, this is in our minds on purpose. We want to be motivated by how bad we were because we don't want to ever be that bad ever again. I love it.
Well, I think it's a bit of a two-way street. Now, I was going to make this point at some point in the episode. I'll just say it now because you talked about how you hope Brian Callahan works out. I thought he knocked this media availability out of the park. Like, didn't put a foot wrong the entire time. And he made so many great points and just really smart analysis from him. So I agree. You know, you like a lot of the qualities that Brian Callahan is showing you. With that said, regarding, there's been a lot of turnover on this roster. So for some of the guys, that's not going to resonate. For a lot of the guys, that's not going to resonate, right? But You look at some of your leaders. I mean, Jeffery Simmons was here. J.C. Latham on Bussin' with the Boys said, I haven't had a losing record since elementary school, right? Like going to IMG in Alabama, he didn't know what 3-14 looked like. He didn't know what 7-7 looks like. You know what I mean? So Peter Skoronsky, who's been here for some of these struggle years. Arden Key, obviously. Amani Hooker. Jarvis Brownlee Jr., who was here for this first year. Roger McCreary, who's been here for a couple years. So, yeah, that message is going to resonate with a lot of players on the team, some of the most important players on the team. But there's also a lot of roster turnover here that doesn't quite know what 3-14 looks like. So not to say that he shouldn't be saying that or making that point. I'm just saying it's probably not going to hit home for everyone on the team. They've got like almost 50% roster turnover here, right? So it's not going to resonate. It's only going to resonate with about half the 90-man roster right now. But again, a lot of, important keynote guys who were here last year that it should hit home with.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that even for those players, they can look around and be like, this is what I need to make sure my teammates are correcting and remembering because, even though they weren't here, they're with the group of guys that were there. And part of the mantra this offseason has been everyone's going to hold everyone else accountable. So anyway, just love the attitude that Brian Callahan is sort of approaching this season with. It's not like he thinks last year, obviously he knows last year wasn't good enough. And it's not even like, well, at least we got Cam Ward. No, it's like last year sucked. We never want to go through that again. And we're not going to forget about it because it is important. All right, Justin, let's talk about Cam Ward now because I think one of the big stories that came out of Callahan's pressers and a talking point is Callahan is emphasizing, like he didn't even take a question before he said this because he didn't want questions about it, that the order and the rotation of the quarterbacks throughout OTAs does not matter, is completely irrelevant. They have a plan in place for each guy that they're working through. Nick Holtz elaborated on this a little bit and said, for some guys, like for Will, we're putting in a few concepts that he struggled with last year. And like, let's see how much better he's doing at these now, or if he's still struggling. So there's a few plays that they ran that they threw Will in with the ones because they want him to run those concepts. There's a few things where Brandon Allen has veteran experience and has run everything in this playbook. So he opened the day as the guy. And then they're working with Cam on certain looks where they know that they're going to be sending a nickel blitz from Denard Wilson's side, but Cam doesn't know that. So it's the first time that he gets to like see what a nickel blitz coming at him looks like as a surprise. So there's a plan to how they're working with all these guys. I think it's important for us to establish that too, so we don't get into some, nonsense conversation about a QB battle and why isn't Cam Ward taking reps with the ones and all that. Basically, Brian Callahan told us that he's tabling sort of the positional competition until training camp, which is interesting because I don't think that that's typically what we've seen here covering the Titans, but that what's happening in OTAs right now is more about installation everybody getting on the same page, understanding the full playbook. And when we get to training camp, that's when the position battles will really ramp up, which gives us less to talk about now because we're not going to talk about as much positional battles, but more to talk about in training camp. So it's a trade-off for us as podcasters, but also just important to note that like it doesn't matter who's taking reps with who. You see Mason Kinsey on the field in the clip of Cam Ward throwing to Calvin Ridley, and you're like, oh, Cam Ward to Calvin Ridley. Is he running with the ones? Well, I don't know. Mason Kinsey's on the field, and I don't know if he's with the ones. Maybe he is because he's a veteran on this team, at least. He knows the system. Anyway, I'm rambling now, but that's my point here is that the rotation of the quarterbacks doesn't matter, and I don't really want to talk about it much more.
It's freaking May. I mean, I had someone in my mentions yesterday. The sky was falling. The guy kept responding. I'm too nice. I kept responding. He kept responding to me as like, what's Callahan doing? Why isn't Cam Ward getting all? I mean, it's May 28th. You're tweeting at me, right? Like they don't play till September, whatever. So no, I don't think it's a big deal at all. And I think they know better than us. They know better than you. They've got a customized plan for every player. That's what they should have, right? It's customized plans for everybody so that they're paying fine attention to detail to everyone on the roster. So I see no issue with it.
Now, as we talk about Cam Ward's performance on the field, we have to remember this is 1 day of OTAs out of a 3-day block before they take a few days off, and then they get back on the field for another set of days. And so the media, actual sessions that the media gets to see are limited. So this is like a 1/3 sample of this 3-day block of OTAs. So I don't know how much it really matters that Cam Ward went 8 of 10, according to Jim Wyatt, in his first 7-on-7 period. We don't know how he did yesterday. We don't know how he's going to do on Thursday because the media is not out there covering it. But you like to hear that he's completing 8 of 10 passes in a 7-on-7 period. Buck Rising actually said that he only had 1 incompletion in the 7-on-7. I'm going to take Jim Wyatt. I'm going to assume Jim Wyatt's slightly more accurate there, where he said Cam Ward just missed Calvin Ridley on a deep cross. His first completion was a strike across the middle to Gunnar Helm. He also said he connected with Van Jefferson on a pair of...
The Gunnar Helm one made the social clip. It was gorgeous.
Yes, and something that I noticed on the social clips and that Nick Holtz talked a little bit about and Brian Callahan's talked about last week is that he's testing these tight windows. And Ben Arthur tweeted about this too. He said he was surprised at how many throws Cam Ward was fitting into tight windows, and Buck Rising said something along the same lines that like there was a lot of throws that make you hold your breath and then they are caught. And I think Parker Kelly, who is covering the Titans out at OTAs, also said something similar that like, wow, he's getting the ball into those tight windows. And you know from last week that Brian Callahan said this is a time to test that stuff. And Nick Holtz said something similar yesterday. This is the time to test that stuff that, you know, how many of these completions can you get away with throwing it into those tight windows? Nick Holtz said at Tuesday's practice, there was one that probably was completed at the college level that didn't get completed at the NFL level. And Cam Ward's bringing it up in a meeting like, wow, I used to do it like this, but now I realize I have to do it this way because the NFL is just faster and the safeties close faster and the windows close tighter. But I think, you know, rather than go through the detailed, like, how did he do in the 7-on-7 and all the completions he made, we can talk more generally about the fact that he looks good and he's completing a lot of passes. And these are his first practices ever against NFL defenders. And I think it's encouraging that he is doing well. I think it's also encouraging that he's making a few mistakes, like the throw Nick Holtz talked about, because that's how he's going to learn what he can and can't get away with. And I also think we shouldn't get caught too much up in how many completions he's throwing and if he's throwing into too tight of windows and all that stuff, because as Callahan has said, as we've said, this is the time to understand what you can and can't get away with at this level. He's a rookie. He's never played against an NFL defense before. He's learning, and that's all good stuff.
Yeah, by all accounts, a really good start to OTAs for Cam Ward. Exactly what you want to see. Grain of salt, I think, like we always say, but he's taken the developmental steps forward. This is the time of year to do that, right? So good opening set of practices for Cam Ward at OTAs, and he's going to, continue to try to build on them.
Now, some things that are interesting on the Cam Ward note, Paul Kahorsky tweeted this out, that Xavier Restrepo told them he is in the building with Cam Ward, Gunnar Helm, Alec Ayamaner, and Chimere Dike. Basically, all the rookie pass catchers and Cam Ward have been in the building daily at 5 a.m. to watch film together, to understand, the offense better together, what everyone's looking for, how they all fit together in the offense, and what Cam himself is looking for. And I'm going to play a quick clip here, something that Nick Holtz said about Cam Ward, his leadership, and his work ethic.
He's doing great. He's an early morning guy. He's here, earlier than some of the coaches, and he gets in early, and he's very detailed and regimented about how he studies. He's got a way he's kind of learned in the past and kind of taken in new information. So we got with him early and he said, hey, can we meet this way and kind of do some things? And then it's been really good for him. It's been good for us too. Good kind of learning some different ways to teach and things like that.
So the fact that he is, first of all, wanting to understand how the coaches are going to teach him and tell the coaches, this is how I want to learn these things. It just shows that like his hunger and his want to be great. And the fact that he's coming in this early every day with his rookies to understand what he needs to understand to pick things up quickly. Now, again, this is all the kind of stuff that won't matter at all if he takes the field in September and is bad. But it's also the kind of stuff that we might point to if he takes the field in September and is good, where we look back and say, he put in the work in the offseason to be good, and that's the kind of guy he is. And again, all of this means nothing in May, but it's all we have to talk about, and it's all encouraging. I don't know if I would be able to find things that are not encouraging right now. Like we said all the same crap about Will Levis last year, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it is encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, again, he's kind of showing that leadership style that we know and what he's all about, right? And he's there earlier than some of the coaches, Nick Holt said. I think that's hilarious. And you love that he's doing it with all the pass catchers, because we've talked about it a bit. But, I mean, I don't know the Titans are going to get this lucky, but it really feels like it could be a foundational draft, right? Like you've got, it's funny how the pieces fit together. A potential X receiver in Alec Iomanner, a slot in Xavier Restrepo, a Z in Shimere Dike, a tight end in Gunnar Helm. Like, if this can be a foundational class for the Titans, then the future outlook is a lot brighter than initially believed, right? At least we believe right now, right? So you love that they're growing together, they're studying film together, they're in the film room together. That bonding process is going to be, really imperative to how they play together in 2025 and hopefully beyond.
And last note I have on Cam Ward is something about his connection with Calvin Ridley, because I mentioned that he tweeted out that completion to Ridley, and I think Easton was the one who tweeted out a picture of Cam Ward and Calvin Ridley sitting next to each other in the team stretch. And something that Callahan said is really interesting to me, because Cam Ward's locker is right next to Calvin Ridley's. I believe it's Restrepo on one side and Ridley on the other, or something like that. That's like, here's the receiver that you are most comfortable with, that you know really well on one side, so that you are comfortable and confident in your locker. And on the other side is the guy that we want to be your go-to receiver, that is going to be the go-to receiver in our offense, that's the most talented and accomplished receiver on our team. And these are the two guys that you are going to spend the most time with in the locker room. Brian Callahan said, quote, strategic placement on my part to how the locker room was arranged. He didn't go into further detail than that. He didn't mention like, oh yeah, I want Cam Ward and Calvin Ridley to form a real relationship that it extends off the field. But I think we can read into that and know that that's what the goal is here, and that it's working. Like, they're sitting next to each other in team stretch. They're talking between reps, and apparently Cam Ward was talking with Van Jefferson between reps as well about, adjustments that either one of them needed to make. But just seeing the strategic element of how Callahan assembled this locker room so that his quarterback and his wide receiver one make that connection. I don't know if you remember when Matthew Stafford got to Los Angeles, like he and Cooper Kupp reportedly were having breakfast meetings every morning to talk about routes and talk about the offense. Like, all that chemistry that you see on the field, it starts off the field. It starts in the locker room. It starts in the team meetings. And I think that that's what we're seeing Brian Callahan try to replicate here.
It certainly does. And look, as excited as we all are about the rookie receivers, this is not a very good wide receiver room on paper. And Calvin Ridley is by far their most talented, important receiver in the room. They're also paying him a ton of money this year to be on the team. So Calvin Ward needs to pepper Calvin Ridley with targets. And there's some untapped potential there. He had a 1,000-yard season in Tennessee this past year. Didn't always go according to plan. But I wrote an article a couple weeks ago on Titans Eyes. He was I think he was third in like the most uncatchable targets in the NFL last year. There's some minimum qualifiers in there, yada, yada. But the fact is, Will Levis and Mason Rudolph threw him a lot of uncatchable balls in 2024. And he still had 1,000 yards. There's untapped potential. He's really important to the success of this passing game in 2025. It could only be really good news if Cam Ward gets acclimated to him quickly.
Very last thing on Cam Ward is just what Denard Wilson has seen from a defensive coordinator standpoint while trying to scheme up practice ways to mess with the rookie QB.
Cam has done an excellent job. One thing that I see about Cam, everybody sees his leadership and his confidence, but he can see the whole field. He has an innate ability to find the open receivers. We're not going to be limited in what we do. We play multiple coverages. We have multiple pressures. We're going to throw it at them and, daily, doing our daily installs. And he's going to respond. He's been responding all his career. And I'm just excited to have him.
I'm rooting for Denard Wilson this year, by the way, as the defensive coordinator. I think he's a good DC, good play caller. I think it was, a bit shorthanded last year. There are some concerns with the roster on paper going into this year as well. But I do think he's a good defensive coordinator. It's very encouraging to hear him already impressed, with Cam Ward just after a couple of OTA practices.
Right. All right. We're going to move through these next topics a bit more quickly here. But the next thing I want to talk about is the attendance, because we know these are voluntary OTAs, but the NFL, coaching staff seem to treat voluntary OTAs as like almost mandatory, where it's like, it's not actually mandatory. We can't fine you. We can't do anything about it, but we're definitely going to react in some way, positive or negative, if you're not out here. Now, a lot of times veterans are obviously excluded from that, established players that the coaches have confidence and trust in, that they're doing the work they need to be doing on their own time. And a lot of times that's fine for established veteran players. The only player, this is from Paul Koharski's reporting, the only player who is not at the Titans facility right now for OTAs is Jeffery Simmons. Now, there were a few other players you may have seen reported that weren't out on the practice field on Wednesday. Tavondre Sweat, Tyler Lockett, Kevin Zeitler. But PK is reporting that those guys have been around the facility, in the building, in the meeting rooms. They're rehabbing various ailments that they're working back from last season or the offseason. So those guys are still there, even if they're not out on the practice field. The only guy who is not there is Jeffery Simmons. Does this concern you at all, or is this nothing? He falls into that category I just described of established veterans, so who cares? We'll forget about this by the time training camp comes. Like, what's your thoughts on Jeffery Simmons not being there?
Yeah, it doesn't bother me at all. He's a superstar 3-tech, good pass rusher. It's not like it's a new system. He played for Denard Wilson last year. He knows what he's got to do, right? He's got to produce. He's got to stuff runs in the backfield, and he's got to sack quarterbacks, right? He's not missing out a whole lot here, especially when you've been with this team for many years and you're in year 2 of this system and coaching staff. And we say system. Is it that different from what he's done? He's got to sack the quarterback and he's got to stop the run, right? Like, he knows what he's got to do. Brian Callahan himself said, if there's one person on the team I'm not worried about at all, it's Jeffery Simmons in relation to his ability to play on Sundays. So to me, it's absolutely nothing. He'll be there for mandatory minicamp in 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, you stole my thunder there, because I was going to say Brian Callahan agrees with you, and here's what he said.
Whether you see him every day here or not, there's one person on this team, probably more than anybody, I never worry about being ready to play on Sunday, and that's Jeff. So been pleased with where he's at. He's working. I know he's ready to roll. So that's pretty all I can say to that.
That's all you can say to that, because he feels it too. He feels what I feel a little bit. Justin, I'm going to get into a little bit of like an old head boomery take here, where maybe this doesn't matter at all, but again, it's May and it's all we have to talk about. This bothers me. Now, this doesn't bother me in the sense that I'm like, oh, Jeffery Simmons is going to have a bad year. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Get Jeffery Simmons off my football team, blah, blah, blah. That's not where I'm coming from. But it does bother me a little bit. Like, I don't think it's this huge concern that's going to like drag the team down or anything like that. I'm not trying to blow this out of proportion or be hyperbolic. But I do think, Jeffery Simmons, you're a team leader. You call yourself a team leader. You're viewed as a team leader. You've gone out on Twitter and talked about how you want to have more than 10 sacks for the first time in your career. You've gone on podcasts talking about how your uncle or I think it's his uncle or somebody still has a 10-sack season and you've never had one and you don't want him to be able to hold that over your head. Like
Hatcher, I think he's talking about.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, I think he went on the Zone earlier this offseason to talk about that stuff. But it's like, dude, if you're really serious about that, and I know he is really serious about that, then get your ass to OTAs and set the example. I know he's working out. I know he's training.
Skip this every year.
I understand, but Derrick Henry also skipped this every year during the midst of winning seasons. I think there was one losing season he came off of that Derrick Henry was not at, or that was that the last season of Vrabel. I can't remember if Vrabel had a losing season his second to last year or if it was his last year only. But the point is, like, they were mostly winning. They were in the playoffs repeatedly. At that point, you are confident that your team is doing everything they need to do. And for me, this isn't even about Jeffery Simmons himself. This is about everything that Brian Callahan has talked about, that we went into detail about last week, where the team is forming bonds right now. They're playing for each other. They're doing this offseason competition thing where they're divided up into 8 teams and each group has a captain and an alternate captain. And it's like, you're telling me Jeffery Simmons wouldn't be useful as the captain of one of these 8 teams, or even the alternate captain as one of these 8 teams, to like just show the younger guys what it takes, that last year was not acceptable, to be there to hold his teammates accountable and to, again, form those bonds so that you're playing for the guy next to you. And I understand he and T'Vondre Sweat probably do have a great bond, and that's literally the guy who will be next to him. But on the outside,
and Andre Coburn, guys who were there last year.
But on the outside, the guys that are going to be lining up on one side of him at some point, at different points during the season, are Draymond Jones, who's also a veteran, and you'd think that they'd like to build something up, and Femi Oladejo, who's a rookie, a guy that Jeff Simmons could take under his wing and say, this is how you prepare your body for the rigors of the NFL. This is how you recover after a tough practice. Like, I get that there's other guys that are doing that, and Denard Wilson spoke about Arden Key stepping up and being a great leader in that regard, and like that he's seen growth in Arden Key from a leadership standpoint, and that Draymond Jones has come in right away and been a good leader for the younger guys and taken them under their wing, and that those guys are there to do that. But when you look at a poster of the Tennessee Titans, like an advertisement for a game that's coming up, or the banners outside Nissan Stadium, yes, it's Jeffery Simmons' face you see, and the young guys know that too. And I don't think that I may be blowing this out of proportion already, and I'm not trying to, but it would mean something to those guys to have Jeff in the building showing them what it takes to be a high-level professional.
He's going to do it at mandatory camp and training camp.
Sure. I just think this is lost time. It's the Aaron Rodgers argument. It's like Aaron Rodgers is a veteran. He doesn't need to be in OTAs with the Steelers or the Jets or the Packers or whatever, but also he does. He needs to be there. Even if he doesn't need to be there, he still needs to be there. Yeah. Jeffery Simmons is the face of the franchise right now. Until Cam Ward proves that he's not a bust, Jeffery Simmons is the face of the franchise. Get your ass to OTAs. That's what I have to say about it. I know you disagree, and I know a lot of our listeners are probably going to disagree. And at the end of the day, it's not that big a deal. And he will be there for mandatory minicamp, I am assuming. But come on, it's just a bad look, I guess, is my point. It's just like, it's bad optics. It's not going to have any impact ultimately, but I don't like it. And that's all I have to say about it. And we can move on to the next topic unless you have a final rebuttal.
No, you can move us on.
All right, let's get into some more quick hitters. I did want to talk about J.C. Latham, but we're running a little long, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. We did talk about it a little last week, the weight loss stuff, that he looks great. He went on Bussin' with the Boys, and I'm not going to spoil everything. I think everyone should go listen to his episode of Bussin' with the Boys if you're a big-time Titans fan like me. But I think one of the things that stood out to me, aside from, and they asked Brian Callahan and they asked J.C. Latham after practice about when they decided that the weight loss was like, it's something that needs to happen, and Brian Callahan talks about sometime mid-season that they realize that, you can't get away with the things you got away with in college. But J.C. Latham talked really in detail about this on Bussin' with the Boys, that it was the Houston Texans game because they had just come off the Chargers game, and he felt like he played really well, handling some, good rushers like Bosa, and it was Bud Dupree because Khalil Mack didn't play that game against the Titans, but Bud Dupree and Bosa, and that he felt like he played really well. And then the next game was against the Texans, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, and he knows Will Anderson really well. They used to practice together. He told a great story about practicing against Will Anderson at Alabama, and he got his ass whooped in that game. And he was like, realized like, man, I can't.
I remember.
I do too. He's like, right. He's like, I can't move my feet as well as I want to. I'm not finishing the way I want to be finishing. He said they've been looking at film this offseason of last year, and like, it's noticeable that he is too big and too heavy. And so I just think that that's really mature of him to like, it's one thing for the coaches to come to him and say, hey, you need to lose weight. And you hear about guys all across the league who are like too heavy and trying to keep their weight down, trying to manage their weight, and they can't do it. And J.C. Latham shows up to OTAs looking like a different human, clearly has put in the work. And I think that is one of the things that's going to separate him. The other thing is his leadership. When the Titans started 0-3, and you mentioned this a little bit at the top of the show, that like, these guys have never been 0-3 in their lives before they get to the NFL. They are used to winning 95% of the games that they play going back to high school. And he's sitting there at 0-3 like, man, we're 0-3? I've never even been 0-3. What is 0-3? Like, how do I fix this? And he wanted to call a players only meeting for the offense. J.C. Latham, as a 21-year-old rookie after his third game in the NFL, knows that this is not right, and he goes to DeAndre Hopkins, the most veteran guy there, and says, D-Hop, we need a meeting. We need a team meeting. And they held a team meeting. And DeAndre Hopkins said something interesting to JC. He said, we're like, it's not just about playing on the field. We got to bond. We need to bond. And I have wondered since I listened to that episode if that has had any impact on how Brian Callahan has structured this entire offseason. It's like, oh, one of my biggest veteran players that we traded mid-season has been part of a lot of programs said, we are missing this element. And Brian Callahan realized we're missing this element and brought it. And I wonder, anyway, it's about JC Latham and his leadership there in that moment as a rookie after 3 games to step up and say that. Super impressive. And I think that the switch to the right side is going to be really good for him. I'm looking forward to him having a great season. And my hot take on all this is that JC Latham, whether it's this year or in the future, is a future all-pro tackle. I believe that. I think he has the physical talent and the mental drive to reach that level.
Yeah, that's obviously a bit of a leap because there's so few all-pro tackles. But I will say that I've got all the confidence in the world in him. I mean, you watch that Bussin appearance. I just kept staring at him. He looks as good as, was it 330? He looks as good as 330 can look, right? Like, it's just phenomenal. You know it looks good when it doesn't look 330, right? He's ripped. He does look really, really good. Going over to right tackle, the attitude, the personality he's displayed, the drive, the hunger, and to play with Kevin Zeitler, a veteran right guard, it's going to be so beneficial to him having him in the building and playing next to him. That's all I can really say is I've got all the confidence in the world in JC Latham. I think he's going to be a phenomenal right tackle this year. I thought he had a pretty good rookie season, all things considered. Just a couple of performances like that Houston one that were a blip and that were an outlier. The goal is to remove those this year, right? To not have those maddeningly inconsistent. He had like 4 of them, right? He was bad in the Washington game, if I remember correctly. And the first game, I think Chicago, he was not very good in week 1 where Montez Sweat ate his lunch a little. Or DeMarcus Walker, actually, I think it was, lined up for him mostly, ate his lunch a little bit. But there's a handful of bad performances throughout the year. You can eliminate those. I think he's going to have a really good sophomore season.
Yeah, and I think the weight loss is going to really help him, play well deeper into the season when your body's tired and banged up and you're in better condition, better shape. All right, we have a few quick hitters left, Justin, I want to hit. Real quick, though, before we do, a reminder that this podcast is brought to you by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville, serving the community since 1985. They have a really cool program. It's a free membership that you can join online. It's called the In Crowd. So follow the link in this website description or go to sinkersbeverages.com. Join for free the In Crowd because In Crowd members get access to allocated wines and spirits, exclusive events, early access to barrel releases, and more. So check that out. If you like to go to your liquor store, Sinkers Beverages is the one to go to. And if you like special perks for free, you should join the Sinkers Beverages In Crowd. All right, Justin, last few things we're going to hit here. I'm going to move quickly, so stop me if you want to comment on something. Otherwise, I'm just going to spew off some stuff. Alec Iomanner impressed multiple people who were watching at training camp. I sort of compiled the notes that TD, Terrell Davenport posted, that Buck Rising posted, that Jim Wyatt wrote about, and that Parker Kelly and Ben Arthur also reported. And almost everyone had good things to say about Alec Iomanner. And I do think that we've talked about his easier path to starter reps out of the rookies because the Titans don't have a true X. But Van Jefferson has also been getting some buzz. And we talked last week about how Van Jefferson may not even make the roster. But Van Jefferson, according to Jim Wyatt, led the team in catches at Wednesday's practice. He and Cam Ward apparently have developed a rapport. They're talking after reps. They're figuring out their connection. And every time I've seen him in a tweet or a video posted by the Titans social media team, like, he just looks the part. He looks like a big-bodied, athletic, physical, good, skilled receiver. And I'm wondering if we're underrating the effect Van Jefferson's going to have, especially early in the season while the rookies are still getting up to speed and being worked in and rotated in slowly. Like, I feel like we're looking at a very, very veteran starting trio for the Titans, at least in week 1, of Calvin Ridley, Van Jefferson at X, and obviously Tyler Lockett in the slot. Are we underrating Van Jefferson a little too much?
Well, I do think that's the way things are going to play out from a starting lineup perspective. I do think Van Jefferson will be the X in week 1. In terms of your final part of your question, underrating, I'm going to choose to reserve judgment because there was a lot of opportunity for him in that Atlanta Falcons receiver room that he was in recently and that Pittsburgh Steelers receiver room that he was in recently. A lot of opportunity. They were better teams that didn't really have a number 2 receiver or a number 3. So there's a lot of chance for him there, and he did not maximize those opportunities at either spot. So for me, I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit and reserve judgment. I expect a guy like that, a veteran guy, to look pretty good at OTAs. It's his 7th or 8th OTA, bunch of rookies in the room. He should come in, with a bit of a leg up. But for me, I've got to see it on the field.
I think that's a perfectly fair take. Femi Oladejo has a new number. He's number 7 now. He's apparently a very infectious personality, so much so that Arden Key has been toned down a little bit. Arden Key, if you remember, was like the big, loud vocal. Yeah, Denard Wilson said that in the press conference that, Arden Key was the big, loud, vocal, energetic guy, and he's taking on more of a leadership role because I think he said Oladejo can be obnoxiously loud. And according to Jim Wyatt, he did have a pressure. No, sorry, according to Teron Davenport, he did have a pressure of Cam Ward, flushed him out of the pocket on one play during the open OTA session. So already out there making an impact, and the Titans are going to need him to make a major impact if they want to make any noise at all this particular season. Callahan talked about Fossil's contributions as the new special teams coordinator. He said he's the most positive, infectious, high-energy guy I've ever been around, and Fossil went up and spoke to the media, and I can sense his energy as well. He had a lot of cool, interesting little tidbits to say about special teams and evaluating players and returners and the skills you need, and I'm not going to go into detail on that. If you're curious about more, go listen to the press conference. The inside linebacker competition, according to Denard Wilson, is extremely wide open. And there's one thing I wanted to bring up here, Justin, because we talked about it last week. Buck Rising said, I'd favor Otis Reese in the inside linebacker competition next to Cody Barton starting out. And this is interesting because Brian Callahan specifically mentioned James Williams and Cedric Gray and gave them praise at the podium. But as Buck put it, you only publicly gas up the guys that need it. Are you reading into these comments from Callahan? PFF dropped on Thursday morning their roster breakdowns. They ranked every roster in the NFL and put projected starting lineups. Titans, by the way, 31st ranked roster, according to Pro Football Focus. Not sure I disagree, although listening to JC Latham on Bussin' with the Boys, maybe I do disagree a little because one other thing JC said was that there were teams that would come up, players on teams that would come up to him after a game and be like, man, you guys are better than we thought. You guys are better than your record. You're just a few plays away here or there from having, the inverse record of what you have. So maybe the Titans are a little better roster-wise than we give them credit for. But I bring that up to say PFF also has Otis Reese as the projected starting inside linebacker next to Cody Barton. So Buck's liking what he's seeing from Otis Reese. PFF's projecting him there, but Brian Callahan is specifically mentioning James Williams and Cedric Gray and not mentioning Otis Reese. What's the Otis Reese conundrum? We talked about it a lot last week, so we don't need to go too deep, but I wanted to hear your thoughts.
You know how I feel about Otis Reese. I'm a fan of the player, and I think he deserves more opportunity, but I do think this competition's wide open. They've got a lot more invested in Cedric Gray. Not as, James Williams is a 7th round pick. Otis Reese is a UDFA. But when I look at Cedric Gray as a 4th rounder, I think they've got more invested there. Brian, it's simple, but something a fan might sometimes not think about. It was one of my favorite Brian Callahan quotes when they asked him about it. He said, well, the pads got to come on. Because it's true. That's probably the hardest position to evaluate when there's not pads on. I hate watching linebackers at the Senior Bowl. Because it's like, they're in these one-on-ones with running backs, and it's so unfair. And offense and defense is so vanilla that it's really hard for a linebacker to stand out in that setting. It's also really hard for a linebacker to stand out in OTAs when there's no physical contact, there's no pads on. This is a battle that's not going to heat up until training camp, and that makes sense, right? It's the pads got to come on. It's wide open. All three of those guys, Otis Reese, James Williams, Cedric Gray, they should be on a level playing ground. It's really hard to predict how that's going to shake out.
Yeah. Jim Wyatt did note that Cedric Gray had a nice pass breakup on a Ward pass intended for Julius Chestnut. So he is, Cedric Gray, out there making some plays as well. A few injury things. Lloyd Cushenberry is apparently working back well. Callahan said he feels good, that he's on schedule. He's, feels good about his ability to anchor, which is one of the biggest things coming back from an Achilles injury. And while he is, working on his body on a side field, Corey Levin started at center while he is rehabbing. So we kind of expected that, but interesting to see it playing out here in OTAs. Treylon Burks is on schedule too, according to Brian Callahan. I think there was some discrepancy or some misunderstanding here because Callahan recently had said that he didn't think Burks would be ready for training camp. And then we see videos of him, doing individual drills and stuff. By the way, he looks terrible. He looks so slow. His cuts are not sharp. But that's okay right now because he's in the middle of a long rehab process coming back from a very serious torn ACL. And Brian Callahan made sure to say that just because he's out there doing individual stuff and rehabbing, he's not back. He's not in really practice. He's not really practicing is what the word Brian Callahan used. He's not in any of the team stuff. He's not running, not running plays with the wide receivers and catching passes that way. He's just doing individual work. But it's nice to see that he's, steadily working back. Kevin Winston Jr. and Khalil Mullings are also still working back from stuff and doing side work. Last two quick notes. Calvin Ridley doing a lot of side work with a weighted football, and the only wide receiver working with the QB group during individual drills. That came from Buck Rising. Calvin Ridley had 8 drops last year, Justin. Did you know that? 8 drops. That's a lot.
Yeah, I remember them. Yeah, he struggled a little bit. There was inconsistency from the quarterbacks, but there was a couple plays he left on the field as well.
Absolutely. So it's nice to see these out there. I don't know what working with a weighted football really does for you, but I imagine it's interesting and similar to
probably harder to catch, right? So if you can catch
exactly.
catch a regular ball.
It's like using ankle weights or whatever. And then finally, Will Levis. We haven't brought up Will Levis this whole show, Justin. That was by design because I'm sick of talking about Will Levis. It's been a huge talking point all over social media. Every reporter keeps asking, how's Will handling Cam Ward being in the QB room? And, the coaches have nothing but amazing things to say about Will Levis, his attitude, his approach. He's still sprinting from one drill to the next, which I don't know why that matters at all, that he's been getting the ball out
good
quick.
Attitude, I guess.
Good attitude. But here's the thing. The Titans coaching staff has a huge incentive to gas the fuck out of Will Levis at every opportunity they can because they want to trade him and they need his value to be high enough that trading him is good for the team and beneficial for the team. There's no way Will Levis factors in to the 2025 Titans. I don't want to hear any talk about how he should be the backup quarterback to Cam Ward. He's got to get a fresh start. The Titans need a fresh start. We can't have this lingering over the team here. Will Levis has got to go, and it's not because of anything it is because he played poorly last year, but it's not because he's a total bust with no hope of ever, being a starting quarterback or at least a backup quarterback in the NFL. It's just not going to happen in Tennessee. It's an
awkward situation. I'm going to cut you off. It's an awkward situation when you draft a quarterback number 1 overall, right? And he said it himself at one point where anyone who's been in my situation knows it sucks. If you watch one of those clips of him talking on social media, at some point, it's almost like the clip started recording too early. He misunderstands the question. He says, "What do you mean?" And someone talks about being here, and he answers with, "I've got no control over that." Kind of thing. So it's like, I think if you read between the lines in his tone, he knows the situation's not ideal. Titans know the situation's not ideal. Again, when you're a starter and you're young and they draft someone number 1, the writing's on the wall. I wrote an article the other day about him getting traded again. I've maintained my faith that he's going to get traded this summer.
Yeah, and that I believe he will get traded the same way Malik Willis was traded right towards the end of training camp last year, and that's the plan, and they're going to use him as a camp arm throughout training camp. They're going to use him as the guy that takes a beating during preseason so that they can protect the guys that they actually intend to go into the season with. And again, Will Levis will not be part of the 2025 Titans story. We can stop talking about him. I'm going to stop talking about him. We're going to stop talking about him. Titans media, keep asking Brian Callahan and Nick Holtz and everybody how he's doing and blah, blah, blah. I can tell you right now, I don't care, and I don't think a lot of Titans fans care, frankly, because he's not going to matter this season. He did close the practice by throwing a pick 6, the only interception of the day, so you can talk a lot about how much he's improved and everything else, but his number 1 issue was too many turnovers, and he's ending the first open practice against the defense with not just a turnover, but a turnover that leads to a touchdown, a pick 6. So has he gotten better? I don't know. I'm not here to evaluate Will Levis anymore. Will Levis will not be on the Titans, but it is funny that he ended the practice with a pick 6.
I'm ready to move on.
Yeah. All right. Me too. Let's move on to closing out this episode. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. And Justin, I just want to bring it up one more time. Your Titans of the South, new release, 2025 edition. I think, we may have some listeners. We gained a lot of followers throughout the draft process, and we haven't talked about your book much during that time. So if you're new to the channel, let us tell you really quickly about what is Titans of the South. If you're a big Titans fan, this is a must-have book. As soon as Justin tweeted about it, I went and bought one for myself. One, because I want to support my co-host and I like him and I want him to do well, but also because I wanted this. For me as a podcaster, this is like the perfect background thing. For you at home as a fan, it is an amazing coffee table book. It's full of big photo illustrations. It goes season by season from the history of the Titans back to the Oilers days. Every season, what stands out, what's important, the historical moments, and it's a really cool object if you're a Titans fan. Just if you're a younger Titans fan, you want to learn more about the history. If you're an older Titans fan who remembers the history, for all ages, I feel like it's a great book. And this re-release, Justin, that you're doing, this new edition, that's only for the first 1,000 buyers who go out to the specific website, titansofthesouth.com, and get it, comes with an update for the 2024 season, the drafting of Cam Ward, and an illustrated Cam Ward player card specific to that edition of the book. It's a really cool collectible item. And if you go to titansofthesouth.com right now, it's 33% off. That means it's just $20. Again, this only applies on that website and to U.S. buyers. They're not shipping outside the U.S., unfortunately. And if you are outside the U.S. and you don't have this book yet, you can get it on Amazon. But I think it's a really cool thing. So congratulations, Justin, to you for this re-release and this new edition of the book.
Thank you so much. And this is not going to happen every year, if you're wondering. You know what I mean? This is probably going to end right here, right? But unless they win the Super Bowl, then maybe we'll talk about revisiting or writing another book altogether. But it felt like the circumstances were unique here, you know, where we stopped at 2024. They draft Cam Ward #1 overall. So it felt like the right time to update it right now, give you one more chapter that covers this exciting offseason, and then throw in a special collectible there where we've got a designer who's done this before. This is not the first time, who is illustrating a special, a Cam Ward trading card. So really, really cool opportunity to get a collectible item in Titans of the South 2025 pack for just $20 for the first 1,000 U.S. buyers, as you said, at titansofthesouth.com.
Yeah, I mean, you can pre-order that now, so go off and do it. Justin, we're going to be talking to Easton Freeze next week. On Monday, We're going to, I think, put out this episode. Easton Freeze reported, you may have seen this if you're a big Titans fan, that Cam Ward is using the VR technology that Jaden Daniels used all throughout last season and is still using to simulate what it's like to be out there on an NFL field before you ever take a snap, simulate different coverage looks you might see and how the offense, how the plays, what opens up against certain coverages, blitzes. You can run this thing at 1.5 times speed so that when you get out there on the actual field, it feels like the play is slowing down from what you've practiced. Really excited to talk to Easton about this. He did some great reporting to dig up this story and posted it, I believe, yesterday, Wednesday morning. And we're going to talk to him about it. And I'm really excited to have that episode come out next week. And that's what we have on deck here for the Music City Audible.
Yeah, that Easton episode is going to be a must-watch. A really good conversation we're going to have with him about the story he broke regarding Cam Ward and the VR training. You guys are going to want to tune into that one.
So if you want to tune into that, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Give this video a like, thumbs up, click that thumbs up button, and drop a comment below. What do you think about everything that we've heard out of OTAs, the Cam Ward stuff, the rotations, the young players? Let us know in the comments. Thanks again to Sinkers Beverages. Remember to go to sinkersbeverages.com, sign up for the In Crowd, and yes, we will be back on Monday. So until then, y'all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.